everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of the Canary, and we've got a significant thing today because we have our first guest.
Hi, I'm Andrew Williams from IBM Australia. I've been working with Ingrid ever since she joined IBM.
Mm-hmm.
Great to be here.
It's certainly been great getting to know him, and it's good that we have him on today because we have an interesting episode or topic for today, and that's interactions between neurotypicals and neurodivergent folks, which is very important for the premise of the podcast because we want to help cross some of those barriers of communication and help us to be able to meet each other halfway.
So there are fortunately many neurotypicals in the space of neurodiversity advocacy, and hopefully that's necessary. But we have a lot of anxiety over getting things right. You know, we don't know always how to interact, and sometimes we're afraid just to try.
Yeah, and I was coming from a perspective where within IBM, I had no exposure to neurodivergent individuals. So I was coming in very much as a fresh person with eyes open and a little bit concerned.
Mm-hmm. Fortunately, the anxiety over wanting to get stuff right is something that we have in common here, since often getting stuff wrong can have a lot of consequences. So we're going to sort of cover some high-level stuff to help at least get things started on that domain. And the first thing to start with is even how you refer to people who are neurodivergent. Well, in this case, we'll be focusing primarily on autism. And according to the Autism Self-Advocacy Network, there's a general preference for identity first as opposed to person first language. Autistic person as opposed to person with autism. Although the preferences obviously can vary between individuals. The reasoning given behind a lot of this is that there can sort of be like an unintentional misconception that autism is kind of an accessory to the person when it's kind of like a core part of one's neurology. Like you can't separate it out very easily. So it's something that just acknowledges the reality of lived experience and replaces much more toxic labels like believing you're broken or you just don't fit anywhere.
I know when I first started getting involved with the neurodivergent community, the language that I used, I wasn't clear on. I was aware that the neurodivergent community was sensitive to language to a certain degree. So one of the first things that I did, especially when I was in these types of Zoom calls, I created a list on the side. Words to avoid, words that I should use. And this helped me a lot, especially given I was a new entry to this community. So just having that type of guidance on the side helped me a lot.
Yeah, one point that I had is when I first started working with an employment initiative at the law firm group that I work with, is that one of the things that HR guides you on is saying you can't ask somebody if they are autistic or any other type of disability. You need to wait for somebody to self-declare anything that they choose to share. So this respects people's privacy and also follows the letter of the law. However, I would point out that if people don't share, it's also hard for us to accommodate you and learn what is and isn't helpful when working with you.
Yeah. I found the best approach for me was to just treat everyone like professionals. And when I was introduced to Ingrid, I would say hello to Ingrid, and I treat her as anyone else within the organization, with respect and by trying to be a clear communicator. And that seemed to work.
Mm-hmm. I'd say the next thing is to not be afraid to get straight to the point with things. Like, I know it's easy to kind of just say, hey, how's your day going, or whatever. Ever. Like, that's just kind of what you do in order to break the ice and ease stuff into it. But from the autistic perspective, sort of getting the random hello out of nowhere can just be like, oh no, what's this going to be about? But sort of getting a thing like, hey, I need your help understanding this document or whatever takes a lot of the anxiety out of it. It's like, okay, I know exactly what to expect from this, so I'm not stuck with the anticipation of wondering, oh no, what's this going to be? Although I'd have to say the absolute worst incident of this is getting the meeting unannounced with no subject on the calendar, because usually mine puts in doom right there. It's like, oh
no. Yeah. I mean, down in Australia, we like to open up a meeting and say, how are you doing? And that's not the correct way to start a meeting, because I mean, even with neurotypical individuals, it gets people to go through a mental gymnastics, and with someone who's neurodivergent, it might lead to increased levels of stress. And I noticed that very much when I first met the cohort within Lansing. I came over to Lansing and I met a cohort of neurodivergence. It was our first hires within IBM, and they weren't responding to my verbal and visual cues as I would expect, and this was new to me. I mean, the very first interaction I had face to face, I remember Ingrid, you're in the office up the back, and I was presenting as a formal IT professional. I had a presentation set out, and I had my presentation, and everyone was listening. And I noticed Ingrid was up the back, and I bet you know what Ingrid was doing. Ingrid was up the back, and she was drawing, and she was very focused on what she was drawing up back. And I noticed Ingrid up the back, and I thought, oh, well, she's not focused on what I'm saying. I was a little bit confused. I wasn't concerned, but so I continued my presentation, and then at the end, as is normal, I asked for any questions, and up shot Ingrid, and she had a very quick question, insightful question, to the point, and it was a very detailed question, and it was on topic, and it was about what I'd been talking about, and it took it to the next level. Ingrid had been listening to everything that I'd been saying, even though it looked like she'd been completely distracted. She was laser focused on what I was saying, and that surprised me, and I was just thrilled.
I would say the same, Andrew, when I've had meetings and, I'll have a neurodivergent person in the meeting and I might find that they're not looking at me, right? They might be looking off to the side or down. They might be fidgeting with something. And you have to be careful not to think that that means they're not concentrating. And actually, I have found, I actually listened to one of my work meetings today on Friday or Thursday while I was walking, and I had it in my ear pods. And I found that while I was moving, I actually had more intense focus on everything that was being said. I wasn't restless because I was actually walking, and I think, so I think that's sort of underestimated, that sometimes having something going on that's just sort of physical in the background can make you mentally able to focus in because you're not restless over anything.
This is especially something not just with autism, but with ADHD, because it can be really difficult to just focus on doing the one thing, because you get so focused on trying to focus on the thing that suddenly you miss everything that was actually said. Whereas if you're kind of like fidgeting with something, or even like I said, doodling on my notebook, it sort of keeps your mind from wandering off as much. And from the autism side of thing, it's the case of, do you want me to perform paying attention, or do you want me to actually pay attention? Because the performance is going to take up so much energy that, again, you don't listen to anything that's been said.
I had another experience with you, Ingrid, about verbal communication. We were co-presenting in Las Vegas. Oh, sorry, San Francisco together. We were in San Francisco together. This is the first time, well, this is the second time we'd really met. And we were in a very busy bookstore. And we were walking around the conference. We came across this bookstore. And you came up to me and said, "Is this a good book? Is this a good book that I should consider?" And you were asking my advice. Now, we were in a very busy bookstore, and there are a lot of people around us. And I looked up at the book, and I passed it to you, and I said, I think this has got a lot of good things. I read it, the back, and I handed it to you. And I think this is a great book. And I turned back to the bookshelf to maybe get another book. And when I came back to you, you disappeared. You disappeared, and I couldn't find you in the crowd. And suddenly I realized that you'd gone over to buy the book at the front of the store. You'd taken the recommendation, you'd analyzed what you wanted to do, and you decided to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a neurotypical would have said, "Oh, Andrew, I think that's a great idea. I'm just going to go off and buy it." You took action. You took immediate action and went. And that surprised me. It confused me for a minute. I was thrilled, but it was unexpected. And that immediate action, action to move forward, that surprised me.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. I almost completely forgot about that because it's like, that's just normally how I am at a store. I don't tend to linger around too long. Once I've got what I need, I'm out of there.
You're out of there.
Well, she's not a big shopper, I will say this. But you're now reminding me of how when she was very young and we would be in a store, she would just wander off somewhere like very quickly without saying anything. And my challenge was always, where is she? It's always, where in the world is Waldo? And I had many moments like this. She's like, I got it. I got something on. I see something over here, shiny, and I'm gone.
Well, yeah. I for that convention, I was new in San Francisco. I'd gone for a wander up to Chinatown to visit Chinatown as a typical tourist during the downtime. And I met up later. I had a great time. And I met up with Ingrid later on at the IBM convention. And she had her own plans on the day off that she had. And she said, what I'm going to do, and she didn't know, I'm going to go up to Chinatown and I'm going to see the bookstores and I'm going to wander around. And I thought about that. And I was a little bit concerned because a young individual in Chinatown, I was concerned about that. But then again, I thought, no, she's an individual. She knows what she's doing. She's an adult. It's not my place to provide guidance. So I was worried, but she was determined to do that. That was more adjustment for me. I had preconceptions of what I should do or concerns. And I would constantly be questioning my own preconceptions of interacting, and I have to keep on adjusting them. And Ingrid kept on challenging these conceptions, and always surprising me.
I've had the same concerns about international travel. I've had friends who've been like, "Oh, I can't believe Ingrid would go travel internationally," and I said, "Oh yeah, she's done it several times."
Yeah.
And the way that we approached it is we did a trial run. I took her to London. So we traveled together. So she did the whole overnight flight. We're dealing with Heathrow Airport and the whole 9 yards, taking the train in, all of these things. So then when she goes and does it later and goes to a gaming convention, she now knows what the routine is supposed to be. So she gets that set in her head, and she's, you know, quite capable of carrying it out. So
because traveling, and I've done a lot of traveling in my career, it's full of distractions. It's full of unknowns. It's surprising moments. But then again, it's also highly repetitive as well. You go to the airport,
I
you sit
actually
in
kind of
the,
like airports.
yeah, it's very regulated. You know, you sit in a plane, you get to the destination, you get in the taxi, you get to the hotel, you go to work, you come back, and it's repeat all the time. It's the same process all the time. So there's certain level of stability there in travel, but there is always the exception as well, which is both challenging for neurotypicals and neurodivergents.
That being said, you don't need to walk on eggshells if something that a neurodivergent person is doing is bothering you. Actually, bringing stuff like that up helps us to feel safer around you.
Yeah.
If you're wondering what the paradoxical logic behind that is that it's a sadly very common experience for many neurodivergent folks to not get told something is bothering someone until it's way too late to actually fix it. And we understand how this happens. We don't want to be rude to people, but sort of little things like that can build up over time. And since we have a lot of difficulty understanding sometimes how our behaviors are perceived by others, it can sort of be a case where there's a level of trust that people are going to tell you something when it's bothering them. And so you sort of have these cases where you're left out in the rain where you did something wrong and you didn't know about it until it was way too late. So bringing up something like, hey, maybe you should stop clicking your pen and find another way to stim, or hey, maybe your volume is a little bit too loud, or other things like that. It lets us know that you've got our back and that there isn't going to be like anything that's going to come out of what for us is basically nowhere.
Ingrid and I, you remember, we've come up with a signal sometimes when we're in public, and if I feel like the volume has gone up too much, we'll just kind of do a little like this, and she knows right away, oh, okay, I didn't realize that my level of voice was going up. And certainly in something like a meeting, having a signal or something can be helpful if there's something that you know is helpful to keeping you on track. It's kind of like the training I had in Toastmasters, which is how public speaking training, you know, when somebody's, I just did I did a non-word, and you might have somebody ticking off. I did this many, I did this many, I did this many, whatever helps you. But having a signal when something is becoming distracting can be helpful.
When during this convention, I'm going to keep going back to this convention because I had so many memorable experiences with Ingrid. We went down to Pier 39, and we had a wonderful evening put on by the event organizers, and I happened to have a lot of time with a group of people, and one of those people was Ingrid, and we had a shared enjoyment of playing video games, and we had the opportunity to play a game. What was the game we played together?
I think it was Galaga, if I recall correctly.
I think it was Galaga 2, and it was one of the big versions. It wasn't on the small. It was one of the really big versions, and we spent way too much time playing that. As well, I would have been 55 or so, playing a game that I shouldn't have been playing even as a 10-year-old. And I was having a great time with Ingrid, and it was just so much fun, and it was just easy, and it was easy for us to have a great time together, and that surprised me too. I thought, oh, this is just like having, great time with my mates, and that was unexpected. So I was really enjoying my time with Ingrid, even though it was a very noisy environment. It was a very noisy environment because we were in a penny arcade. How did you find that experience going into that noisy environment, Ingrid?
Hmm. It was one of those cases where I kind of expected like travel and stuff to be a lot more sensor sensory taxing, relatively speaking. But
Yeah,
also, I'm just familiar more so with the arcade of the environment of arcades specifically to know what to expect. Like I've been to a lot of Dave and Buster's around as a kid, which is kind of like an arcade sort of thingy that we have in America. So it's just a case where it can be very context dependent.
mm-hmm.
A lot of noise. It's also a paradox that sometimes the things that we do to relax can seem a lot more overwhelming and stressful than like just staying and being quiet. And this is what I like to call kind of the power wash or sandblasting method of stress relief. Because sometimes stuff is caked on and you just need to like get it off. So it's just like, I've had a rough day at work. I'm going to take on this difficult boss fight in this video game in order to like blast all of that away. And I suppose that segues into another point is that social battery can run out even on the best of days. And this is a lot more like your phone dying on you than it is just
Mm-hmm.
us not liking you. Because that
Yeah,
happens even for people that we really do like.
and I'd like to go back again to Pier 39 because at the end of that evening, and it was a long day, we were enjoying ourselves at night. It started to rain. It was raining all that night, and there were so many things going on. There were circus performers. It was raining. There were people everywhere. I wonder, how did you get home? Because there were taxis everywhere. You must have been tired as well as everyone else. How
I
did you
took an
cope with
Uber
that?
home. My phone was running out of battery, so I kind of had to find a random outlet to charge it up. But I did what I usually do, and I took an Uber home.
Yeah.
All of that sensory noise did end up having the consequence of me losing my umbrella in all of the chaos.
Oh, I think everyone was losing their umbrella because I remember the water was coming up to my ankles. It was one of those deep drenching rains that happened. It was an amazing night, but by the end of it, everyone was over it.
So one thing that
We were all struggling to get an Uber.
So one thing I wanted to say about social situations and some coaching that I received from the Autism Alliance of Michigan was
Mm-hmm.
it's fine to ask everyone to social functions such as a team lunch or, you know, an after dinner happy hour or, you know, the company party. But it's not okay to require it because if it is truly a social function, some people will choose to participate and some for them, it would just add to their stress. And some will want to go one day and not another day. And one thing I certainly learned with Ingrid has always been when we've had, say, a family function, some kind of event at our home, and if she's there together with us, she'll participate for a period of time. And when she's maxed out of it, we just know she's going to withdraw and nobody takes offense to it because we know it's time she needs a quiet space. And then maybe she'll come back after, you know, she's had some time to herself. And so respecting those boundaries is important.
Yeah.
And I had thought, oh, I can have everybody come to like the team lunch in the office. And they're like, no, you can't. So, you know, be careful not to, you know, invite, don't assume somebody doesn't want to come, you know, either and assume that they don't want to be social, but also, you know, ask.
It's
And some
nice to
people will
feel
be into it, some people
included.
won't.
Yeah, it's nice to feel included, even if there's like stuff that would prevent us from going for whatever reason. Alrighty then. We've kind of gotten into some things that are a little bit more heavy, so now I want to turn things a bit more positive and teach you about the neurodivergent love languages so you can tell how we show that we like you. And there's parallels to the normal 5 love languages that you have. And the first one is, well, we sort of described it a little bit when we was describing our gaming time in the arcade. Parallel play, which is the parallel to quality time. Oftentimes, when it comes to hanging out, it's good enough to just be doing stuff in the same general area, even if it's not necessarily the exact same activity. Kind of think of it like how the cat likes to sit in the same room with you off at a distance. The second one is info dumping, and this is the parallel to words of affirmation. And it basically, if we're going on and on about a subject we really like to you, it's kind of our way of trying to connect, and is also kind of what small talk does for neurotypical folks. It's just sort of a way to establish like a feeling of comfort and connection. And I understand that sometimes people might not always have time to hear the extended history of the kinds of paint dyes they used that were really toxic or whatever. But in that case, it's just like, hey, we can schedule time to talk about this later. The next one is a fun one, penguin pebbling, which is the parallel to gift giving. And it's basically the equivalent of, this made me think of you. It could be everything from just a little souvenir left on your desk to like a meme sent in DMs or whatever. And it's the sort of thing where we're not necessarily expecting you to respond immediately, but it's sort of thing that shows, hey, I paid attention to what you've said. The next one is support swapping, which is the parallel to acts of service. And this is because sometimes it's hard, especially when executive dysfunction gets involved, to remember all of the things that you need to do. So we kind of remember stuff for each other, like, hey, that free trial of that subscription service is about to run out. Maybe you should cancel that so you don't accidentally get billed. It's like, it's not that we don't think that you're not capable of doing that yourself. It's just a case that, hey, it just might be nice because the world is so busy to have someone else remind you of that. And finally, we have deep pressure, which is the parallel to physical touch. And it's worth noting that you should always get consent for physical contact, since there can be a lot of bad history around that, but it's not that we don't like it. This is where you sort of have like weighted blankets and whatnot. I've heard some people describe it as wanting to crush their souls back into their bodies, since sometimes it can feel kind of awkward existing in general, but it's like, hey, that kind of stuff can feel really nice. I know it's a lot of information, but above all, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to make sure you're making an actual effort, and that alone will usually get noticed.
Yeah.
So support swapping, just hearing this, I realized that there is somebody who has been doing this with me sometimes when I'll get these chats on my Teams where it's like, hey, isn't it time for this or whatnot? And I don't think it's a, hey, they don't think I'm competent. I don't take it that way. But I think that some of that support swapping, they're like, hey, I was thinking of you, and I'm, giving you support by reminding you of something that's coming up that, we might need to get started on.
Well,
the info dumping, I'm definitely remember. I definitely have heard some of the info dumping, and I hadn't really thought of it in that light. I feel like sometimes the info dumping is one of those opportunities for us that are neurotypical to just see the depth of intelligence in the people that we're interacting with, because sometimes during the info dumping, we'll get such a technical level of something. You're like, wow, I can't believe you know all of that.
Yeah. I was co-presenting with Ingrid, and so it came to the time where we were up at presenting, and I set up and I went into my 15 minutes and I wanted to touch on the same points, but I didn't touch them in the same order. I actually improvised, and I said things at a different time during my session to what I'd pre-rehearsed with Ingrid. And then I handed it over to Ingrid, and there was a slight pause. There was a look from Ingrid, and she then continued on with her presentation, which was exactly the same as before. And it was perfect. It was a great presentation by Ingrid. And Ingrid came up to me afterwards and said, "You confused me because you didn't say exactly what you said you were going to say in the same order." And I hadn't realized that there was that expectation by Ingrid that I would be able to say exactly the same thing. I don't operate like that. But Ingrid had done two things. She had an expectation that I would, and she'd also basically memorized everything that I'd said the first time and was confused when I didn't say it exactly the same way the second time. And that, again, surprised me. I'm constantly being surprised by all my interactions with the neurodivergent community.
There was a time when Ingrid was in a play, I believe about late elementary school, early middle school. And she was always surprised that anyone didn't know their lines because she literally memorized all the lines of the entire play. So she could tell somebody their line, they forgot it. But where there was, the need for a little grace was realizing, well, some of us, like looking at me in middle age, I often think of what I want 10 minutes after I needed it, right?
Yeah,
so we don't always have the same pitch perfect memory that you do, Ingrid.
Ingrid,
how did you find presenting to such a large audience? How did you find that?
Honestly, I suppose that I have a little bit of a knack for it already, being a little bit of the theater kid side of things from being very young, because it's like presenting to a crowd is almost easier in some ways than typical social interactions, because I don't have to like granularly interact with every single person in the crowd. I can kind of just treat them like they're one entity for all intents and purposes. And maybe I occasionally look at some people in the crowd in order to say like, hey, I'm acknowledging you. And so it's just, I can practice exactly what's going to happen beforehand. So it's often being that prepared is kind of almost a way to relieve anxiety by sort of making sure we can control as many variables as we can beforehand. Like, a recent thing for me is that I was getting set up with a new general practitioner, and I was able to fill out like all of the forms you do at the doctor's office beforehand online and get basically everything, almost everything right. I did remember some stuff when I was in the actual appointment beforehand, and the receptionists were so surprised at how prepared I was. I'd even like brought some of my exact scripts for my medications since they didn't have the exact ones online. So it's just like, part of that is not necessarily always a case of I'm better than you. It's like, I'm getting all of the details of this right in order to assuage my own anxiety. So that's often a lot of where that's coming from.
There's always a constant with my interactions with you is I was constantly being surprised in such a great way, and that's what I loved about connecting with you and working with you. Always being surprised.
And I think that's a really positive note to end things on, because it's like the days can often blend together a lot. So just getting to interact with a lot of different people is one of those things that can help really break things up. I mean, there are even studies about this that show a lot of how memory is registered is in the sum total of new experiences that you have. So you can essentially make time feel longer by filling it with a lot of new experiences. And this is just one potential avenue to do that.
I would just say that for me as a manager, I find it's helpful to make sure that we're both employees and managers taking the time to tell people when they got it right. And I think because there's so many times we're not sure we handle the interaction well. I can think of a time when an employee of mine who's neurodivergent came to me to ask about the wording. And they've done this more than once, to ask about the wording of an email before sending it to the client. And I really appreciate that, and I tell the employee, because that's their way of relieving their anxiety about how their wording might be perceived. And,
I've
even
done that
artificial intelligence can now help you, because you could also, if you don't want to come to your manager, feed it through Microsoft Copilot or something like that, and ChatGPT, and say, hey, can you make sure I'm wording this in a polite way? So I think we can even use technology now to help us manage interactions too. I say this, and I'm not the tech person in the room.
Well, thank you for taking the time early in your time zone to come on and chat with us, Andrew. It's been a really fun conversation.
It's been great. I look forward to more, many more.
We've already got some episode outlines underway.
All right. Thanks so much, Ingrid. Thanks, Pamela.
Ciao. Thank you so much, Andrew, for joining us.
All right. Cheers.
Bye.